Thank you. Councillor Brown, thank you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful we can come before you this day. We're so thankful for the many blessings. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to live in a free country, and we're so grateful for those that fought and served for our country. We'd ask a special blessing on those that are in need of help. Bless them with love and support. Help us that we may be able to be wise in our decision making tonight, that we may be able to do our best. We're grateful for all we have, and we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor. All right, today is the 3rd of November, 2020, and we call in this meeting to order. We recognize Temple City Star and Channel 32. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's great to have you here. We have an agenda. Are there any changes that need to be done? So I need a motion to approve it. Councillor
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. We don't have a delegation today, so we go right away to the adoption of the minutes of October 6, 2020 from the CCW meeting. Councillor Brown?
I make a motion to adopt the minutes of the October 6th, 2020 meeting.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. It's adopted. I just want to let the public know that I'm in a chair because Councillor Drew is on business tonight and asked me to take his chair. Thank you. So let's go on to number 6, Bylaw and Policy, Bill 7. This is an interesting bill. If you remember, that's again a bill that came as red tape reduction and to try to offer incentive to different municipalities and cities to try to create a better environment to attract business. So there are some samples that have been put there for your information. The whole Bill 7 is there. But you could see how, for example, Cardston County applied it to incentivize the growth of agricultural production manufacturing in their county. And they had another one that was also interesting, is to try to attract new businesses or to create an incentive. I'm trying to find it exactly. For example, for campgrounds. So they have one that is to incentivize the development and revitalization of recreational campground businesses in Cardston County. So that is specific to specific businesses. If you look at the town of Edson, their approach is a little bit different. It's a reduction in taxes over a 5-year schedule, where the first 2 years, 100% of the tax would be absorbed by the municipality, and then there is a decreasing rate, 75%, 50%, 25%. And so that means that the businesses whose assessment is not exceeding 25% of the previous year assessment can apply for that type of benefit. If their assessment exceeds the 25%, then they're only prorated to the 25% difference from the year before in their assessment. So if they increase their assessment by 35%, only 25% max will be covered by that bill. So I appreciate Jeff giving us this type of bill with those example, because I'm wondering if in our town there is a sector that could benefit from something like that. And I believe there is. Personally, I thought the first thing that came to my mind was probably the industry that allow us to bring tourists in. So anything to do with hospitality. That is the one I thought of. I don't know. Any idea around the table? Are you interested in looking at it? There is always, of course, some... we have to be careful, right? As the mayor of Edmonton and the mayor of Calgary said when this bill was brought forward, it can create a disparity regionally, and it can create a disparity between types of businesses. So the equity in taxes does not exist at that point anymore with that bill, potentially.
It's hard
Councillor
to compare. I'm just looking at the Edson one. I like some of the ideas, but it's very difficult for us to compare ourselves with some other. Like Edson has a very large mine, I believe. I believe their county just spent $8 million and built their rec center for them. So they've already got money. They can afford to tell a business that's coming out, you don't need we won't tax you for a couple of years, because they've already got money coming in. So it's, I'm not against giving tax incentives. I'm just saying it's difficult to compare other communities with us at this.
No, I totally agree. We in a specific kind of region where we don't have the same benefit as those large centers, no doubt. Anybody else wants to comment? If not, we'll leave it for what it is, and if we need to kind of bring it back in later days when we have ideas. Councillor Barnes?
Just some thoughts here. A good question to Jeff. Have we had many businesses come here asking for tax breaks, incentives?
It's not common, no. I don't know that I've seen the business decision based on tax incentive. I don't know that I've seen that before. The difference is, though, previous to Bill 7, there weren't many out there because they were very difficult, and there was a lot of risk associated with municipalities offering them, but you're going to see them as common now, and they may become part of the decision, where we have close neighbors to us advertising quite aggressively, for example, that they're offering those kind of rebates. So I wouldn't say we've seen that affect the purchasing decision, the building, or the development decision. And one thing I just wanted to clarify, I appreciate the county did a really good job of having industry-specific ones, but it doesn't have to be. You know,
yes,
we chose the examples quite carefully. So 2 are industry-specific. Fort McLeod's is a little more robust. Edson's is about as simple as you can write it. You know, it's a 1-page, here's the deal. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a feel for what options were out there. If I could give my 2 bits and what we've seen before, the feedback I've had before is when our existing businesses expand, so they lay out a great amount of capital, it's going to take them a couple of years to start to get return on that capital, but we immediately tax them on the expansion. Right? I've heard from those business owners, the Pharmasave on Main Street at the time was the one. So years ago, Ryan Vadney and I put together a program about if you increased your assessment by more than a certain percent, the town will waive the increase in assessment, not your core taxation, but the increase for up to so many years. And we were told by Brownlee at the time not to do it, in municipal affairs as well. Bill 7 now allows it, but that is feedback we have received, that, you know, we take our existing buildings, we do dramatic expansions, and then we're immediately taxed on that before we really get a chance to get our feet under us. So that's an interesting consideration, and in a community our size, we will see and have seen most of our growth come from our existing businesses. We don't see a lot, and that's typical of small communities. I think 80% of your business growth, or some EDA has some statistic, it's 80 or so % of your business growth comes from your existing businesses. And we've seen some substantial renovations and additions on Main Street over the last few years. So they've increased assessment dramatically, some 50% or even close to 100% of increasing their assessment. So that's one piece of feedback we have heard.
Thanks. Well, the other part of the question is, if we're forward thinking, maybe we should look at down the road, what if we do get somebody coming in that's looking based on the new bill? Maybe we should have some verbiage in here that would cover that, so that we can look at that, so they're not gonna just come in and say, I mean, they have access to our bylaws, right? They can look at them and say, well, they're not gonna give us nothing. But if we have something in there, in case down the road that the future that happens, then they can say, oh, okay, well, we may qualify in that way, that they could come and talk to Jeff, and then he can go through that scenario and bring it back to us if necessary.
Okay, so Councillor Barnes, help me understand. Do you want, then, are you recommending that administration draft a bylaw? Okay, but what would be the term? Are you looking at something like Edson, or are you looking at something, as Jeff is referring to, which is a little bit the Edson story, over so much increase in assessment?
Well, that was the thought that I
Percentage.
had, if somebody's going to expand, and that we could ease their tax burden over a
Okay.
few years. That's kind of where I was thinking.
All right, so are you thinking of a schedule, because Councillor Court was saying we're totally not on the same plane whatsoever in sense of revenues, right?
No, we're not,
So
absolutely.
what exactly are we looking at? So in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are you thinking of a 5-year schedule?
Well, I guess that could be negotiable with the business. They may not need 5 years, but maybe up to, if they need it. It could be a 2, it could be a 3, it all depends on their specific needs, eh?
Well, you have to kind of make it equitable at that point, right?
Well, yeah,
Nobody's gonna take less incentive, right? They're
No.
always gonna take the maximum incentive.
that's true.
And they should.
Yeah.
Maybe we could recommend the administration to have them look into it and bring us back something that might work for us.
When I said I like the Edson idea, I do, but I'm not sure we want to go 100% for 2 or 3 years.
Well, that's
But
what
that's something
I'm
we can
trying
work
to,
on. Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to determine. What is your feeling regarding that? Or what does administrations maybe suggest we look at?
Well, one of the things, if you look to frame something solely on increase in assessment, you never lose the core taxation value, right? So
Right.
Right, which
if
is,
you have a building that doubles its size, you're still taxing them 100% on the original assessment. That
Right.
doesn't go away.
Yeah,
But you're potentially just graduating in the new
Okay.
assessment.
yeah.
That doesn't risk your core non-residential assessment, for one thing.
and that doesn't change the education nor the old age. That still has to be
No,
paid
yeah,
fully.
You still have to pay the education
They still have to
tax.
pay that, yeah.
Yeah.
Pay the tax, correct.
So the only thing is a municipal portion on the excess assessment up to 25% or whatever.
Right.
Councillor Selk would like to talk, and Councillor Barnes.
So in the Fort McLeod model, they said $50,000 in increased assessed value.
Yeah.
Be some
That's another way to look at it.
idea that, administration could look at something like that as a.
Yeah.
I might comment on that, Councillor. I found it interesting that they used a solid dollar number because it's so relative. If I'm a small business, that 50,000 effectively doubles my assessment, and it's very interesting they used a fixed number. I haven't talked to Sue to understand what the conversation was behind the fixed number, because there's a number of businesses that could simply stand a $50,000 assessment increase without a lot of impact. And then there's some that would be very considerable for them. So yeah, I'm curious why they picked a fixed amount. I don't know that.
Do you want to
Just to
carry on?
The reason I said that is if you drive around the Fort McLeod business core off of Highway 2 and then the downtown core, it's a pretty vibrant business core there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
They got some
true.
natural advantages being on 2 major highways, but having said that, they got a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so Councillor Barnes, and
Well,
then,
what I was thinking with our industrial area out here, it's so close to the county, and we got a new business going up in the county. I don't know whether there was room enough in town. I don't know what the deal was there, but it would have been nice to have that business in town, so that the county's getting the taxes on that. But I hate to see that we might, because they're so close by, that could happen again. And I just as soon have some incentive out there to invite businesses here.
all right,
I mean, I'm happy that they've got that,
okay,
but it would have been nice to have something like that here.
all right. So, Councillor, are you willing to put a recommendation forward to have administration draft a bylaw?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to figure out the term a little bit. Are we looking percentage of increased assessment? Is up to 25% a figure that makes sense to us or not?
If I could clarify, do you mean assessment increase of 25% or greater is eligible? I'm not
No, no, no.
sure why we would only.
Less than.
Why would you, I don't quite understand why you would do that.
Okay,
If they increase their assessment by 100%, let's say.
Right.
You're only suggesting we would waive the tax on 25% of that?
well, that's the Edson model, right?
That's not how I read the Edison
Well,
model
that's the
either.
way I read it.
It's just
Because it says, addition, expansion, or renovation are only eligible if the assessed value of the total property is greater than or equal to an increase of 25% or more than the previous assessment. Okay. This exemption will only apply to this increased assessment amount. Yeah, okay, so you read it that have to do at least 25% increased assessment. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's maybe that's the sentence that is maybe not as clear as possible. So are you suggesting then that we should say the whole of the excess assessment is then tax reduction eligible? Is that more the way you would look at it?
I'm not set on anything, but it
Okay.
seems consistent with the other things we've seen, that if you increase by a certain amount, so somebody does, a tiny thing and it affects it by 2%, we're not
We're not worried about
entertaining
that.
Right, and that's what they're saying
that
here.
kind of a thing, right? But if it increases their assessment
By
by some
25,
hurdle,
at least
okay,
25.
Or in Fort McLeod's case, it was a fixed number. Then it kicks in on that whole increased amount.
Okay, so can we give administration some direction? Councillor Barnes?
I make that recommendation that we have administration look at this tax incentive for at a rate that we're satisfied with up to.
And draft the
Draft
legislation,
the legislation that would,
cover it.
that would cover it. I don't know exactly what the wording would be, but have administration do that and bring it back to us, and then we'll have a better idea.
Maybe bring us back a few options.
Are
Yeah.
we considering new build? Let me ask that. Are we considering new build, or are we just considering increase to existing assessment? That'll give us the direction we need here.
Well, here's the thing. If we got new businesses coming in, they're obviously going to build new. And they're going to want some incentive to come here. Or they're going to say, well, so-and-so down the road, this community is going to give us this, And it's going to become a competitive thing.
Well, this
There's
was...
no way around it.
That's the fear of Edmonton and Calgary. That's exactly
And
their
so
fear.
we have to get in the game, or we're going to stagnate as far as industry, and I don't want that.
Well, trust
It
me,
hasn't changed much in the
that didn't
47
rush.
years I've
They
been
have
here.
not rushed in this town for the past 9 years. So, Councillor Brown.
I personally would rather fill Main Street with businesses, so I don't think it should be on new builds only. I would love to see, as somebody would say, lipstick on a pig on Main Street happen. I would love to see, $50,000 on the front of the Cahoon Hotel or some of the other buildings we have on Main Street. I would love for them to be able to get a tax incentive so that maybe they would be more prone to make it a little bit more fabulous on Main Street.
But maybe we need to have two sections. When I think of new build, I'm thinking of industry out in the industrial area. I'm not thinking downtown. I think the downtown speaks for itself, and I agree with you 100% that I would just as soon have an incentive for these buildings on Main Street to fix them up and make them look really nice. I mean, we did that 30 years ago with the Main Street beautification program. I was involved. I painted. I helped build them, and I was employed for quite a long time working on that project. It was great. And we did have some incentives there for them. But over the years, it hasn't been kept up. And so
Yeah.
we need to do that. But I think when it comes to, industrial businesses coming in, we have to consider that and look at what we can do for them. Because
But-
I'd really like to see
yeah.
some of the industry come into town.
It's not a beautification
No.
incentive. That's not what it is.
It's not.
It's
an
a
upgrade.
business revival and attraction
Yeah.
incentive.
Yeah,
So beautification is not part of the story,
no.
Councillor Selk.
So, Community Futures already offers a low-interest loan to
Yes.
businesses on Main Street in Cardston and
For beautification.
Pincher, Cardston, I can't remember, and no one's taken advantage of it.
Exactly right.
But one
Yeah.
had, I thought.
No. And so that was a beautification kind of, but that is not a beautification incentive.
So,
Jeff?
Councillor Brown, I wasn't implying new build only either, so you can have both. I just want to have some idea before we draft this. Is it new build and
I
assessment
think
increase
both.
over a hurdle percentage in any non-residential property anywhere in the town? That's kind of the parameters I would like.
That's kind of where I'm thinking.
Okay, are we okay with that line of thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Bengry, are we okay with this? Are we okay? All right, so that's the direction. So we have a recommendation, so we need to vote on that recommendation. All in favor? Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
So under 6B, you have different benches that have been bylaws. It's a review. As you remember, Jeff told us he was going to bring them over to kind of give us a sense of what's happening. So if we go through them a little bit, you will see that one of the debenture has to do with the Lee Crest rehabilitation interim borrowing bylaw, but that one is covered by grants. And you want to talk about it, Jeff?
Touch on the high points this quick.
Please, go ahead.
So in order, 1605 has 3 payments left on it. That is being combined with 1689. So you may recall we took a line of credit to do the repair, and we're amalgamating that with the original loan.
Yep.
Right.
So that's going to combine into one payment. We're hoping by the end of the year. We just met on that today, Jill and I, to see where that was going. As the mayor said, the Lee Creek rehab bylaw, that's I think like 1.7 million. That should go away next year. So the projects are all complete. We'll submit all our costs by mid-month, we hope. We still cross our fingers that we get 100% compensation, which we should. We have every indication we should. And then we have to hold that for a number of months after that because DFO has to come and see that all of
Inspection.
the environmental setbacks, or not setbacks,
The regulation
offsets. Sorry,
offsets.
all the environmental and habitat offsets that we said we put in are there and that they're functional and all that stuff. And so once all that's done, we can get rid of that line of credit. So that is a requirement of DFO to have that in place. That should go away next year. There is currently no balance on that. We've been cash flowing it through our other cash. Councillor Court, did you have a question?
Yeah, when you said there's 3 payments left, is it one payment a year or 2 payments a year?
Yeah, 2 a year, but
December, June, and
Yeah.
Okay, so a year and a
every
half
6
left on
months,
that then,
yeah.
okay.
And then borrowing by law solar is this building in the ice rink. Borrowing by law golf is a line of credit for capital at the golf course, which we don't have a balance on right now. We've been cash flowing it. Technically on the books there's the balance, but there isn't actually a balance at the bank because we haven't had to dip into it. I think we dipped into it once this summer just to cash flows for a little bit, and then we paid it off again. So, oh, yeah.
So we have nothing on that line of credit.
No, again, on the books, we do. On the books, it's mostly, well, probably 3/4 used. But right now, there's actually no balance, because if I have cash sitting in the bank, we just pay the line of credit, so we're not paying interest. And then if we get short on cash, then we'll take out of that line of credit. But right now, we don't have any balance on that at all. Now, when I get $1 million worth of bills in on the outfall line, I may have to look at using one of those to cash flow for a little bit. But right now, are we sitting with balances in any lines of credit? No, we're not right now. So taxes are all in, we're in a good cash position right now. So we pay off all those lines of credit for the time being. Then it's the solar farm, and then the wastewater outfall line of credit with the credit union, which will amalgamate in with the payment on 1605.
And a solar farm is,
Well, we're just one payment, 4 payments into that, so it's just brand new.
right.
16 years to go.
4 down and 15 years to go.
But it's all within the terms of NMAX.
It seems to be performing
Good.
fairly okay, yeah.
Good. No, that's a good sign. Thank you.
Can I ask a question in
Go
regards
ahead.
to that? Not to bring up something negative, but Medicine Hat's just scrapped their solar farm.
Yeah, but it's
Well,
not a
there's a solar
thermal, it's a solar thermal
generating
farm.
Oh, it's not the same thing at
No,
all.
not at all.
Oh,
Not
okay.
even
Generating
close.
plant, yeah.
They concentrate sun into a big ball in the middle to heat water to create steam.
And out of the steam, they create power. Totally different.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you for that clarification.
All right, so those are the debentures that we have. So if there's no questions at this point, we're going to go into the budget, and then we'll have. Do you have a question, Councillor?
I have a concern.
Okay, go ahead. But is that regarding the debenture, or is that further down?
It's probably intertwined with the budget,
Okay, all right, go ahead.
with debentures,
Go ahead, Councillor.
and that's the letter from the minister, Tracy Allard. Jeff, have you done any research on that?
You talking about the letter in the agenda today?
Yes.
No, I haven't followed up on anything on that.
Okay, so are you referring to the last letter that we had in our packet?
Yes.
Is that the last item in our packet?
Yes.
Okay, so
It's very straightforward, and it's a concern.
can you read the portion that is concerning you, Councillor?
Yeah, she talks about the revenues for Alberta budget, and their anticipated higher, expenses are higher than anticipated because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
And then the second paragraph is very straightforward. And I've never seen a letter come from,
You mean the third paragraph?
second and third.
Okay,
But
go ahead.
in light of these economic circumstances, Alberta may not be able to sustain our current levels of infrastructure and operating spending. We are already planning for budget 2021. There will be some difficult choices the province must make to ensure Alberta's finances are sustainable over the long term. And the crucial paragraph, having met with many municipalities recently, I understand your communities are also facing significant challenges. I will ensure your views are represented as we plan the provincial budget. In the meantime, I strongly encourage you to make certain all of your capital spending is used to support critical infrastructure that will benefit future generations of Alberta and position your community to participate in our economic recovery. Basically, she's telling us we are not going to get money. That's the way I read this letter.
I would say you're probably correct.
And I have never, in the years that I've served on council, I've never seen a letter that's so forward, and to the point.
I cannot disagree.
So if I could awkwardly segue that just a little bit.
Please.
What I was hoping to do tonight, and not to dismiss that, Councillor, because I think I was quite startled by the letter myself. And in fact, Minister Allard spoke today at RMA, and JD said it on that, and I asked him if she referred to that at all, because I had to imagine there was so much left open-ended that it, as she did not really refer specifically to the letter, but did refer to some of the challenges financially. As far as budget, what I'd like to do, and I shifted gears on this just today, is focus on our operating piece today, because and I'll explain a little further why, but we can't ignore that. I agree with you, but I was hoping tonight that we could try and get the operating budget a little bit closer to balance. We'll talk about capital too, for sure, because it's all in there, but and I'll explain a little further why. But do we need to do anything more with that right now, or are we okay to start going through operations?
Let's do the operations, do the budget, how you've planned it, Jeff.
Okay.
And I'm good with that. And then we need to discuss, you know, what you've got estimated funding to be carried forward to the 2021 budget on that per capital budget, the 5-year.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead with the operation.
So you all have a new 11 by 17, but I do want to make some general comments first. The initial plan was to work on funding. The initial plan for tonight was to work on funding to get the proposed rec facility funded. So Hawk and I have been working on a number of scenarios that we would use combinations of reserves, MSI, and other funding to get to that number. Where we were struggling, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg discussion, is when we would create a new scenario that would then impact the operational budget. And so we thought, well, what we decided we would approach this, and this isn't to skirt talking capital, we must get that reconciled too, through this process. But so we were developing scenarios that were affected by the operational budget and determined that if we could get the operational budget close, then the numbers that we're dealing with to get the capital where you wish it to be collectively are clearer. Mm-hmm. Because what we found is so many of the numbers were so hypothetical, because for me, for example, we had $584,000 in MSI in the capital sheet I gave you last week.
Right.
But what I'm going to show you tonight is, in order to try and get operational down, we had to, where we're proposing to pull some of that to fund some road repair stuff in operating. So now all of a sudden you don't have $584,000 in the capital budget when we try and build those scenarios. Mm-hmm. So we kept interrupting the capital budget, and our scenarios were obsolete minutes after we created them. Mm-hmm. So my hope tonight is I'd like to go through the operating, and I am cognizant of how long sometimes this can take, but let's spend some time and get through the operating. In the sheet I gave you last week, we were just over $500,000 short on the operating budget. What I'm going to propose to you tonight gets us within about $65,000, and doesn't impact the capital sheet altogether too terribly at this point. We still got to find the 64 grand, but we've been pretty good over the years of dealing with those kinds of numbers. Yeah. Right. The $500,000 is a bit scary. 50 to 100 grand, we've been pretty good at that. But so that's what I was hoping if we could go through tonight, and then at our subsequent meetings, the numbers that are available to build capital are more fixed. Okay. They're so fluid. We really struggled with it over the last few days. And I remember the last meeting, we've only had just a few working days to try and work that through. So a couple general comments. We still, on the operations, have tremendous amounts of work to do. Certain facilities, such as pool, rink, golf, will be scrutinized more. We'll be entertaining, looking at reduction in potentially staffing or hours or services in those facilities to try and mitigate some costs at those. Labor has been submitted by Jill and by Bart and by the supervisors, the labor budget. I have not gone through it thoroughly. That's not a budget I give to you. It's all the staff and then their requisite amounts and everything. Then we bring it to you in a lump sum. So I'm still going to be going through that quite carefully. And then there's still some grants for capital that need more thorough investigation. So we're getting onto that even starting tomorrow. And then I also met with Bart and Hawken today. And Hawken's going to be exploring some additional grants for some of the capital that was self-funded in the capital budget, which will free up cash. Okay, so we're going to be working on that quite a bit over the next couple of weeks to try and do that. And then I got some notes specifically for capital. We're trying to get that moving ahead, specific to the rec facility and getting our numbers a little better. I'll speak to that more when we get to the end. So are we good to kind of start at the start here? We're not going over hundreds of line items. I've highlighted probably a couple of dozen. By and large, our operating budget is very similar to previous years, but there are a few accounts that have some big changes in them or proposed big changes in them that I want to talk about. And the first one is always starting right at the top. This budget's built on a 2% tax revenue increase. And the question for you as a council is, early in the game here, are you comfortable with that? Given the pandemic and given all the stuff people have been through or going through, and employment is precarious for some, not all. I don't think we were affected as much as other areas, but still there's a perception that the economy is in a bit of a hurting time and employment is tough. So is 2% to build us around right now an acceptable number?
Okay. Councillor Gold.
I think in light of the downloading that the province is doing to us with policing, et cetera, I don't see how we're going to get away with not increasing a little bit. I understand it's not a great time to increase taxes, but we're all getting hit. And the province is downloading costs onto us, so unless we cut back our services, we're going to have to increase our taxes.
Just for reference there, the policing charges this year are 3.8% of total taxation for this year, going up to 7.7.
Yeah. So
The biggest jump is after 2021, or 2022, sorry, that's the biggest jump. But we're still, this year, 3.8% of the 2.8 million is the policing.
Okay.
As a reference point.
Councillor Bengry.
Jeff, I can appreciate what you're saying, but we have to have a starting point. So if we started at 2%, work through the budget, and see where that leaves us, then we can adjust accordingly.
Can I ask you something then, Jeff? The education, what's the increase in the education?
I don't know that we know that exactly yet. It is, in non-residential, it's pretty much flat, and residential, it's up about $24,000.
So 24,000 divided by 1,200 household, what is it?
13 locations.
It's about it's just
About
under
12?
1% of total taxation, both residential and non. So that's the increase we're anticipating.
So policing increases our tax by 3.8 on its own,
Yeah,
plus 1% at least for education.
correct.
And then we are expecting 2% municipal on the top of that. That's a lot.
Well, let me clarify that a little bit. The 2%
Oh, is it-
we have proposed is considering those increases.
Okay, all
already.
right,
So
okay.
We've scaled
Okay.
back in other areas.
Okay.
To only impact by 2%.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to make sure it was taken care of. So
7% is 2%.
the 2% increase represent municipal, the seniors housing, and the education. Okay, so I feel a little bit less panicking.
No, just like last year when we got hit with the $100,000, which is 5% by the way in the first year, we tried not to just flow that all the way through, so we took $100,000 of the previous year's reserves and added it as income to 2020. I'm already in the 2020 was last year.
I know.
Right.
In 2020's budget to mitigate the policing cost.
Yeah.
So this year, we're not taking, we are using a lot of reserves to fund some things, which we need to talk about through this, but yes, we're absorbing a good percentage of the policing and education costs now.
Okay, thank you. So, and that 2% also has in it a factor that is inflation factor in it.
It's simply saying we will try and balance this budget with only a
With
2%
that.
increase in revenue.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Got you.
We've
Question,
been doing 1.25 for the last 3 years.
No, just trying to understand.
Jeff. When we talk about policing costs, is that solely town of Cardston, or does that
no.
involve also the county contribution to policing?
Just
That's,
There's no contribution.
No-
to
no
the
sharing.
Rural policing,
no, no, no,
okay,
no.
all
They
right,
pay theirs, we pay ours, and it's a formula of population and equalized assessment.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so, just after taxation, still on page 1, in 107841, we have MSI capital for operating, and you'll see that that is at 240,000 now. In the budget under street materials, Bart is looking, we have an excess amount of waste concrete and asphalt out of the pit in Etna, and it's actually really getting quite a lot. And so we need to get that crushed. We can use MSI capital for that purpose. We consider it an operating expense. It's not capital, but it qualifies. And so we've transferred 100,000 from MSI capital into MSI operating to fund that crushing. We'll see that again on the expense side when we talk about that a bit. But we end up with a bit of a liability on our hands the bigger that grows, because we have to deal with it appropriately at some point. So if we crush it, we use it in place of pit run. So whenever
Yeah.
we're fixing a road or rebuilding a road bed, we use it in place of pit run.
And we do that every second year about,
We're doing the asphalt millings every second year, but the concrete
Okay.
is a different machine. It's a bit of a bigger monster.
okay,
And so it takes one that can pull all the metal out, so it's full of rebar and it's full of all kinds of things, and so it's quite a
Mess.
little monster of a machine, and it's a mess, so it's getting away from us just a little bit.
But we contract that service to come in.
Yeah, it's somebody from up north that has this machine that can bust up that concrete and manage the metal in it. So it's quite interesting. So that, I'm just showing you that when we look to try and get our $500,000 deficit down, one of the ways we do that is we can transfer for eligible expenses from a capital grant, which is
Good.
what's here. Everything open for discussion, and if you don't like that, that's fine. We'll have that conversation. And as always, I'm jumping around. Stop me on any line, anything. Page 2. For us, the only thing we looked at, down at the very bottom, so starting in the 172,702, we talked about golf course last year. So we are budgeting, even at that revenue, we're budgeting $100,000 loss. Now, 65,000 of that is the payment on the line of credit. And right now, we don't have a balance on the line of credit. So we may not actually, from a cash perspective, incur that $65,000 expense, but we can't ignore the capital expense funding either, right? So it's there, but I just want to give you some context that it's really budgeting operationally a $35,000 loss.
And it's the payment on the, what do you call it, line of credit?
Line of credit,
Okay, and that's how much?
$65,000 a year. So the other thing at the golf course, which I'm going to meet with Miles, they're just wrapping up now. I think everything's been blown out and we've got things put together. We have to have a stronger look at our labor costs at the golf course. So they've really grown on us a lot. Our break even used to be around 480, and now we're at 612. And our labor there has grown quite a bit. Now we've made some decisions to have full-time permanent staff there too, right? So we know that was happening. That's clear. But I want him to really look close at those labor budgets. Our outside, our groundskeeping labor at the golf course went over $200,000 this year. And so we really have to keep that a close eye. And so we'll just have a really good examination of the labor in all of our facilities here over the next couple of weeks. And that should be okay. The other thing that has a huge impact on our budget, and it isn't determined yet, is the last two items there, the domestic electrical transmission and the commercial electrical transmission. So
Goes up.
we're just starting as of yesterday, working with Kevin, looking at previous year's consumption, looking at the trends and what the rates are looking like. So that's going to be tweaked right up until December 20 whatever our second meeting in December is. That's gonna be massaged right up until that point. And again, that can swing us $20,000 to $50,000 either way. You know, it's just such a big number when we get into all that electrical distribution transmission stuff, so. Just know that's still gonna get, on the next page too, at 192,404 and 405, those are $1.2 million just in those three accounts. So if there's a 1% swing, well, there's 12 grand. So those things will move and move around a little bit, and we'll talk about that more later. We're just not quite there on those. Now I wanted to talk about, so this is all the income side, the last two income lines on the middle of page 3, engineering and PCB compliance. In the budget was two items that were, we'll call them unfunded. They were simply tax funded when we brought you this last week. The first was engineering, which was to do a study on the condition of the main water line coming in from the water plant to like the big 2-foot line to the lift station.
Do you have one?
When we've done excavation on it,
It's
there's been
okay.
some rust spots on it, and we simply can't have that line go down, it can't. And so we had some engineering and study in for that, and then we also have PCB compliance. We've got a bit of a backlog in the electrical department on PCB compliance, so older transformers have oil with PCBs in it. We don't just get to toss those out. We have to remediate the PCBs, which come with the cost. So we accumulate as we change out. We accumulate, we stack them up in the yard, and then there's a company out of BC that comes and pulls all the oil out and cleans them. And so we did have that just tax funded, but we've taken 60,000 out of the electrical reserve. So they've been able to put some money in their reserves over the last few years, so we funded that within the department and not just tax funding, which I think is appropriate in this case. It's really part of their whole capital conversion, right? And that's an expense that goes away over time because the new equipment doesn't have PCBs in it. So we'll work our way out of that over time.
I have a question to ask
Go
Jeff.
ahead, Councillor.
With this PCB stuff, that stuff used to go to Swan Hills, they're closing down now, right? Or are they closed down?
Honestly, Councillor, I'm not really up to speed. I just know Leonard's got his contact for it, and I thought they were out of BC.
Out of British Columbia?
Yeah.
Well, I just read somewhere that Swan Hills was closing down, and I'm thinking, whew,
Yeah.
where are they gonna send all this stuff to be recycled or to be destroyed,
Yeah.
you know?
You know, we have in that transformer, the Powerhouse Hill transformer, we call it, that has a massive amount of oil in it.
Did we, a few years back, didn't we get fined for PCB leakage?
I'm not sure.
One of our transformers?
We had to fix something.
Yeah, something to do with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It was before your time, I think.
Yeah, I don't recall it. It could have been, I just don't recall it. So I just want to give you an idea of, we're pulling from a couple of reserves. And we've had a specific engineering professional fees reserve established for a few years now. And so we're proposing to pull from that to fund that water line study. So that's
Good.
That's tweaks from the revenue side, so we're always looking to increase revenues. That helps balance as much as reducing expenses. So we pulled some money out of reserves. Now on the uses of funding, 201752 we already talked about. There's your policing requisition and how it looks from now till 2023. So again, 2021 is 3.8% taxation, moving up to 7.8, which is no small chunk as a percentage.
What page is that on?
Sorry, page 3, Councillor, 201752.
That's huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really, really scary to see
Right.
that
I don't have
amount.
assurance of what it looks like in the years after either, so.
It's really bad.
Yeah. Other than that, the only expense that really changed is the council expenses for next year because there's an election. So we always have a few thousand more in those years for, you know, laptops and orientations and different things. There's just a little bit more in an election year. And you'll see the election expense in the operating budget coming up soon as well. So we've got that expense in there. I didn't have anything of note on page 4 at all, unless any of you wish to touch on any items there. In fact, the next few pages are pretty status quo. Page 5, the only item I just mentioned, 212840 was the election. So we budget about $7,000 to host an election. and actually we have to start our preparations on that quite early, because now
Which number was that?
212-840 on page 5.
Okay.
The nomination period opens January 1st now,
Yeah.
January 2nd, I guess. It used to be just a number of 8 weeks or something before the election, but now you can actually formally submit your nomination January, the first business day in January, which I don't expect we're having a bunch of people running in the building to do so that early, but it's certainly an option. And I didn't have anything else on page 5, or, I did have page 6, I have, this is midway through page 6, 232501 is street materials. This is the one I was speaking of where we brought in MSI capital to fund. So anything under this, we can use MSI to fund, even though we call it operational, MSI does consider it approved as an expense. And so we have commonly done that in the past for gravel, patching materials, crack filling materials. We've used MSI capital. That's been pretty consistent since the start of MSI, that we've done that. It doesn't mean we have to continue to, but we have done that consistently. And that's all that I had on that page. On page 7, there's some quite minor things. A little bit of a bump in our safety program materials, 232511. The whole organization has to get recertified for first aid next year. And there's an OH&S requirement for so many first aiders per site, per number of employees. And so we've got to all go through that. I think I'm the one lone non-certified first aider right now, which isn't something to admit, that I wasn't here the last time we got recertified. So mine lapsed. So I have to start over, but that's another story. And then down under 241504, Bart mentioned last time about doing treatment of the raw water reservoirs with some chemical and aeration processes that we need to improve. We've got 20,000 in there, but that's one where Hawkins is going to go look for some alternative funding on that. One of the interesting things about that amount specifically is it doesn't meet the MSI threshold, so we can't use MSI for it. It's too low. Your MSI projects have to be of a certain substance, we'll call it, or a certain amount before you can use MSI. So it's not eligible for that. But we may be able to combine it with the filtration media at the water plant as an overall project.
Can we piggyback it on
And that would
something?
be eligible, so we're gonna look at that a little bit closer, and see if we can find some funding that's out there for that. Then as you go to page 8, why did I have a note here? Oh yes, okay. Under 242502, this is speculative only, because there's a number of hypotheticals. Under our sewer plant electrical, it's a massive electrical bill at sewer plant. If we can do, by the end of next year, the retrofit to the membrane versus the RBC system, Bart actually expects a significant reduction in the electrical bill, because we're eliminating a whole bunch of very large motors out of that system. So we don't know what that looks like yet. I just wanted to point out, we still have the existing number through 2023, but we're hopeful that that comes down by a considerable percentage over time. Our pumping and power costs at some of our facilities are extraordinarily high. I didn't have anything else in on page 8. There's nothing that's too different from previous years. Page 9, I don't have anything either. There wasn't any major changes. No, that was about all I had there. Page 10, I have a couple of things. I just noticed right before the meeting, I noticed something we missed on page 10, 262336, which is our regional alliances. We didn't move South Grow to $1 per capita. You had made a resolution to that effect a couple meetings ago. And I just,
to $1, wasn't it?
I missed it when we did this, but it's minor in its impact.
Yeah, that may not
$2,300.
take effect in 2021.
Oh, okay.
They may
Okay.
ratchet that up.
Okay. Okay.
But I might have a percentage.
Yeah, we'll watch
Increase this
closely
year.
with them on that then. If it's maybe 50 cents or whatever it might be this year, we'll keep an eye on that.
It's not gonna balance your budget either.
Yeah, that doesn't solve any major balancing problems. One thing we did to generate some cash to balance this one is in, and again, there's a lot of discussion to be had here, but under 272011, when we presented you this last meeting, we had a full-time position for the rec facility, but we realized realistically we could probably cut that in half for the full-time and half-time. And we don't really know the scale of it yet. We're making some assumptions. So we knocked that down by 50% in 2021.
Question.
I think that's more reasonable.
Councillor Bengry has a question.
Jeff, I want to go back.
Yep.
241501.
Page,
It's on page 7, down the middle of the page.
Yep.
You got a water study at 55,000.
Yeah.
And then we move over to page 8, and you've also got a wastewater study there at 30,000. Could we not combine?
Just 1 second here, Council. Let me find the 30,000 you're talking about. Which GL is that 30,000 in, Council? Oh, in 504, okay. So, okay, the receiving study. Okay, no, very different. One's mandated, and one is the water study with the county that we got the ACP grant to go through.
Oh, okay.
So, if I have that, yes, that's right. So in our water distribution, we're doing, with Associated Engineering, is doing a study on the water infrastructure. That's fully funded. That's in this year, and it's going to be completed shortly. In fact, the draft is coming this week, the final draft of that study.
Good.
So, no to your question, they are mutually exclusive. And the 55 was fully funded. There was no tax.
Excellent.
money for that. Well,
Thank
local
you.
tax money for that. I don't want to say no tax.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, there was a grant. We got a grant for it.
Page 11 or whatever?
Let me see.
Nothing there.
One thing I just wanted to mention, and it's not a discussion for tonight. Page 10 again, still. Hawk and I were just looking at the campground, and we got money carrying over to finish because we had all the stuff, all those rocks piled on this year. We couldn't finish that project, so we're rolling that forward to finish next year. Our margin as the town is pretty darn slim on that campground
Very slim.
when it's all said and done, and I think
Yeah.
I know there's rate
need to raise the
manipulation that can be
rate.
had, that's part of it. I know we've talked about that, Councillor Court, we need to go down that road with the operator. But we maybe need to have a good, strong look at a couple of things, some more radical than others.
Mountain.
But one is changing how we currently operate it, so whether we staff that going forward, past this contract, and I need to see what that looked like. Or to be frank, whether we just sell it. Because we're making so little on it, we could easily make that money in the interest from the proceeds of the sale. Again, depending on what it's sold for, I don't know any of those numbers right now, but I'm just saying, we need to have a discussion on that facility, because it's, the margin for the town is pretty darn thin.
Yeah.
I remember this discussion quite a few years ago that basically council today said, we're not in it to make money, we're in it to attract people.
Yeah,
But I'm not so sure why we can't do both,
yeah.
quite frankly.
We're not quite in par with what's around us, and we have a beautiful campground. Maybe we need to start to be in par. Yes.
So is that contract now up, Jeff?
It's got 2021, I just looked at it before the meeting.
So it's got
Got one
another,
more year.
one more year to run?
Now, both parties have a notice clause,
Yeah. Which is what?
right, a month.
1 month.
$40.
So can we apply for the county's tax incentive and sell that?
Oh, hey. Let me think through that for a second. I don't think so, is the short answer there.
Councillor Bengry, Councillor Barnes.
Jeff, concerning the campground, our crews still go in and do the electrical upgrades or repairs. They also do the tree trimming and also a lot of the spring cleanup, do they not?
So we do all the upgrades and maintenance on it, certainly. We do hire out a lot of the major tree trimming, so we bring in one of the arborists every year, and it's on the cycle. It's a kind of
Are those
performance
expenses
as well.
included in
They're
this?
the parks materials. where
Okay.
they're at. And what was your last question now? I just forgot.
On the spring cleanup. and-
Oh, yeah, our parks guys go down and kind of get it to a point and then turn it over to the contractor just with help, but again, we operate that on a very narrow margin. And I think before the end of the year, we should at least have a discussion of the long-term operational plan of it. And I know that the notion of just selling it is offensive to some of you. I don't mean it that way, but we have to look at those numbers, right? What if it's worth $1 million? Well, now we're gonna tax it at non-residential rate because it's private sector.
I'm pretty sure it's worth all $1 million.
Right, so we just need to look at that. If we're only gonna make $10,000 a year on the thing anyway, then
okay.
there might be different ways to approach it, but that's
Yeah.
not my recommendation, it's
Okay.
just something to consider.
But, I mean, there is value in looking at it no matter what. Any business that we have, we should have a look at it, because we need to look at it from a perspective of why do we want to keep it and why do we want to divest ourselves from it, and try to understand what's the plus, the minus, and then make decisions from it. And maybe the decision is strictly on the idea is to attract people, but it's a business also, right?
So I've brought this up several times over the years. And I talk to a lot of these campers, and they all say the same thing. Man, you guys are so cheap.
Yeah, well, we have been for way too long.
And I understand. We have a shortage of campsites all over Alberta right now. People will pay. We're so inexpensive. I mean, I don't know what they pay in other places. Maybe we need to do a study and find out what other campgrounds are charging to see where we are with regards to everybody to compare. But we have one of the nicest facilities in the province. And maybe we're selling ourselves short by not charging appropriately.
Okay, Councillor Brown, Councillor Court.
I guess my question is just to Jeff. In previous years, did the town ever run it? Like, I mean,
Yes.
Once or
Yeah,
twice,
so we have, and it's been a lot of years
Yeah.
because,
When I came.
well, I started here in '08. So that would have been, '09 was probably the last year
2000.
that the town ran it. So we would hire some seasonal kids and someone to camp there all summer for the evenings and those kind of things. Where it gets, I don't want to say difficult, it's certainly manageable, but where it's been super nice to have a third party is they're taking the calls all year for reservations, all the credit card information, doing all that banking, refunds, bookings, deposits. That's all taken care of by the contractor, which is very nice. We don't mix that into ours, and it stays pretty clean. And that this is not brought up to be any slight on our current contractors. They've been, the people who use the campground love them. They've been great to work with. This is no comment on them at all for a second. They've been great. But that comes with a cost.
but I guess just then why did the town gave it up for that reason? It was just too much work.
I think it's, I don't remember all the details of it, but I do know just logistically you have staff that go do something else mid-season. You got all the college kids that leave in August, but your campground's open until the end of September.
Right.
We run into all those kind of seasonal staffing challenges again too, right? And so I think that was a lot of it, that all of a sudden when your campground's full, you don't have any seasonal staff anymore. Because September, the campground's full.
Right.
And so you're struggling to get people there. and
Right.
I think it was just cleaner to have that happen, and it certainly is. For me, again,
For sure.
two things I've noticed: when we weren't running a golf course and when we're not running a campground, I'm not pushing back on that at all from an administrative point of view. It's nice, from my point of view, selfishly. It's very nice.
Councillor Court.
There's two things. When we discussed this way back in the day, the idea was we just want to break even because we wanted to use the track. But to speak to you, I've camped a lot this summer all over southern Alberta, and we are way, way, way cheaper than anywhere else.
I know we are.
Ridiculously way cheaper than anybody else because we offer a full load here. We have everything here, internet, the whole shooting match.
Yeah.
I paid as much as $50 for half of what we're getting.
What is it
here.
right now? $30?
$30.
I rest my case. I've always said we should be $35 to $40 a night.
And I can
Waterton's
tell you, you'll
40.
hear about that too. Trust me. Every
But
time
you know
we
what?
bump
They'll
it,
pay
you'll
it.
hear about it.
Well,
They will
that's-
still pay it.
And that may be the case, Councillor, yeah.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah.
When I see how many sites they are short, I mean, they're short a lot, all over the province. I mean, right here in southern Alberta,
Okay,
they're short probably 500 or 600 sites.
Yep.
It's
Well,
terrible.
development went in
What's
at
that?
the MPC at the county for an 88 site unit at Payne Lake.
yeah.
That's something we'll review before, maybe by right at the end of the year, certainly before mill rate time.
Yeah, we need to
We
look
need to
at
have a
it.
thorough look at that.
If I can make my last comment on this.
Okay.
there.
Go
The
ahead.
sites that are going in right now are the yearly sites.
That's right.
These are nightly sites, so they're getting harder and harder to find.
Yeah,
So everywhere around here is all based on a yearly site.
And Councillor Court brings up actually a very interesting concept, because the model more and more is annual sites, and your labor goes way down. But once everybody's in and has their space, instead of taking 1,000 reservations a year, you're taking 48, because that's how many sites you have, period. You don't check them in, check them out, dump station, all that stuff. You know, it's a much lower labor model, and there's a reason why guys go to that.
Well, is there something we want to look at?
We'll have that discussion down the road for
Yeah.
sure. We'll explore all those models.
if
Councillor
it's a
Bengry?
yearly site, we'll certainly make a lot more money.
If you can get them in for a year.
Because it becomes a parking storage area for those units as well. I mean, you take a look at what they're paying out at, north of Glenwood there,
I know.
the Shipley's campground. They have absolutely no issue getting $2,000 a year per camper. And they're full, except for the few. They keep a few extras. But
Okay.
they've got a demand out there, and people are more than happy to pay it.
This discussion that we had when we were looking at the campground, and that Councillor Court will be reminded of this, is part of that not being an annual campground was the money taken from those people that come in.
Yeah.
You have an annual campground,
Then
and you're
you
just,
lose that.
you're
Yes,
just
that's-
going there and using it.
Yeah.
But if you have a nightly campground, then you're going down on Main Street and purchasing groceries and whatever,
Yeah.
you know, and so there's advantage and disadvantage to both.
If I might just make one more point. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that we should go down the road of
Oh, no.
annual things, because I think when all these annuals or all these other sites that are nightly switch over, we're gonna be one of the few, and it's gonna be still a demand. It's already a demand, and we'll keep that demand. They're gonna still wanna come here.
100%.
And we can, I have no qualms about the people that will pay a little more for it, because they know what they're paying everywhere else.
Okay, so maybe we can ask,
Opened up quite a can of worms.
we can ask
Hey, it's a
administration
good
to
can
kind
go
of,
where-
kind of look at it. Is that what you want, Councillor
me?
Van? Do you want administration to kind of review
Well, I
the,
intend to.
okay,
Yeah.
We'll have that
perfect.
discussion.
All right, fine.
They're gonna come
Thank
back
you.
with it anyways, and I think we need to
Good.
go there.
There is some food here, but I think we can just get through this section.
Could we
of
finish
operations
that?
and take it.
Are you okay, Councillor?
Is it that
Okay,
time
go ahead.
already?
I won't bring up campgrounds for the rest of the discussion.
Please.
Page 11 is really, we get into our pool and ice center and Summit Civic Center. We're gonna look really close at all those things. We're going to see what we can do to trim 5%, you know, here and there, and what we can do. I wanted to mention something that Hawk and I are having a bit of a debate on. I hope we don't go down as much as the campground road here, but bear with me. When we look at the spray park, this is what really brought it to light, and I haven't got my head around this yet. Is the spray park the only cost there? Well, there's a little bit of labor, but it's really utilities.
Yeah.
It's power, water, and sewer. Okay, those are the three utilities, and we will get billed from NMAX, we estimate around $50,000 next year for that facility. Yeah. But it actually isn't the net cost to the town, because we are the recipient of the water and sewer revenue, not the electrical, but we are for the water and sewer. And Hawk and I are trying to get our heads around, okay, how should we be budgeting water and sewer and recycling and garbage utility charges to all of our respective facilities when we are the recipient of the revenue on the other end? Because you could argue, and I would suggest you can argue, that that is a a falsely high number for the
Exactly.
actual cost to the town to operate that facility. And I would agree with you. However, I have to put that number in because we have to write checks to NMAX for that amount for that facility. And if I don't put it in, you'll be upset that I'm
Sure.
$40,000 over
Sure.
budget in that account next year.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work through, and we're gonna talk about this a lot more. We didn't come to any conclusions today, by the way, but we're actually, one of the things we kind of came to, and this is, I like having these conversations with Hawken, because that's how we got all of our wage and machine cost recovery.
What is what I was
on-
thinking of. I was thinking of the same
So we
story.
were talking about, do we create in our bylaw a new rate, which isn't, we're charging everything institutional, but maybe it's a municipally owned rate? Which is really what our hard costs on per cubic meter of water for sewer and water, do we look at doing that differently? And then track it that way, there may be some options, so we're gonna look at that closer. Because what happens here is that just added $50,000 to our expenses in this budget, which by the way, we're looking to mitigate about 60 at the end of this exercise, that we know we're actually not going to fully incur. And so we're working through that a little bit, but it's not as simple as it seems on the surface. It really isn't, because there are costs to the town for the treatment of that water, both in water treatment, distribution, sewer treatment, sewer distribution. We have costs. So we have to try and figure that out. We're working on that.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Is this, part of this cost, are they gonna be covered by the county, any of that cost?
The only thing covered by the county is what was negotiated in your ICF.
That's it?
That's right.
Okay.
So the spray park was not part of
And
it.
that $137,000 is in the income of this budget.
It's in
So
there.
we're still mitigating a fairly
Mhm.
substantial operational deficit with that money in the budget, for sure.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention on page 12, we're getting to the end of it here. In our 272602 celebrations, so we've reinstated all of our celebration costs with, let's hope we have a handle on COVID by next
Oh,
summer.
gosh, I hope so.
I mean, today, as we stand, it doesn't look great.
Nope.
But let's hope that we are, all systems go for celebrations
Well,
next
maybe
summer.
after the election's over tonight.
Well, I don't know what that's doing about COVID, but it's certainly, so we put them all back in, and we'll talk about that some more. We have, I mentioned earlier, the bottom half of that is golf. I'm gonna meet with Miles on the labor needs, what we can do to try and trim that up as much as we can. When Paul comes in, I'll have him have a really strong look at those as well. I mean, that will be his responsibility when he gets here. But for the purposes of budget, I'm gonna step in there and work with Miles this year on it, and we'll see what we can do. And other than that, oh, there is a couple I want to point out, and I don't want you to put a ton of stock into them because they're absolutely going to change. On page 12, under 272704, we have a clubhouse mortgage. We didn't put anything in 2021. That's just how we funded it by other means in the last capital budget. My
Yeah.
hope is we have no borrowing on the clubhouse. That seems to be everyone's intention. That's 100% the hope. But when we put in $1 million clubhouse and $500,000 cash, we balanced it by putting in a $500,000 loan. So we're gonna work through that on the capital side, but it's hypothetical at this stage. Don't read too much into that at all. And the same thing goes for the top of page 13. There's this $2.3 million loan at 1.994% for the rec facility, but the numbers are hypothetical, the terms are hypothetical, the need is hypothetical. It was just balancing the capital budget last time. And we didn't put it in 2021 either at all. So please don't read into that too much.
Jeff, back to page 12, the bottom, town beautification.
Yep.
Are we still in Communities in Bloom program?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too.
We have not been active,
We have
at
kept
least
that
the
money.
committee has not been actively being judged the last couple of years.
We have kept that money to give prizes
And we
to different initiatives. The end of the week and in the winter time, best decoration, etc. So that has been used for that purpose.
Keeps their sidewalk clean all the time.
Page 13, I didn't have anything else. And then we end the operations on page 14. I just wanted to talk about, and this is always our account. We talked about the transfers to reserve 294762. What we did is, we just put in a static number for the next 3 years. So this budget is taxing for $125,000 to go in major utility capital reserves. Now, actually, I want to qualify my comment. That number could be coming from utility revenues, and it could be coming from the wage and machine time recovery from public works projects. So I said tax for it, and that may not be particularly accurate. It could be coming from those other sources, but you have an expense of $125,000. Now, if we go ahead with the sewer plant, we will have depleted the major utility capital reserve. It will be starting from scratch. And so we can't ignore that.
Yeah.
Because the water plant's 10 years out potentially, or phase 2 of the sewer plant is years down the road. So I didn't want to just take it out, because we can't ignore it. We've had tremendous success in building that capital reserve over the last 5-6 years. I think we started 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've been really, really pleased with how we built that. So much so that we can potentially do a $3.3 million sewer project with strictly on reserves, which is tremendous. So I don't want to forego that, but we did mitigate that number to a fairly modest number over the next 3 years. To try and get the number.
How much did we put in the past? 200?
Well,
200,000?
we've
250.
what we've budgeted and what we've put there have ended up very differently, because we've used any surplus we've had the
Yes,
last
that's
couple
right.
of years. We've plugged it in other areas, and then anything left
Right,
over, we've
yeah.
I think one year we put in 75 or something.
So it has not been a consistent number there.
Okay,
It's
all
been
right.
a very
So it
different number.
fluctuate.
So the next section is the capital, which we won't get into now, but the bottom line on the very last page of page 18 is 2021 is still underfunded by $64,575, which, to be frank with you, council, is a very manageable number for an operational deficit at this stage of the game.
It really is.
So really, really a manageable number. We do anticipate a little bit of operational surplus, so that we may have some surplus to fund some things next year as well, but we don't know that for a couple more months. And I think we can get there. The next 2 years are a bit of a mess at 604 and 374 respectively, but remember, we've got some hypothetical bank payments that we aren't going to need. So those will come out. We've got some other things we know we'll be able to pull out of there once we get this year's operating and capital settled. Because even the decisions we make this year, for example, and this goes back to what Councillor Bengry brought up about the letter from Minister Illor, if our funding drops considerably going forward, we have to decide how we're using excess MSI in this year, if that's going to help mitigate the next couple of years or not. We just have to decide. And unfortunately, when we're doing budget, we have no idea what that ominous letter means financially. We have no clue. So we have to take some guesses here. That's what I'll show you right now for operations, and we can maybe have a...
We're going to recess at this point, yeah. Councillor Selk, do you want to do that for us? Thank
I'll
you.
move to recess for 15
20
minutes,
minutes.
20 minutes.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much.
These other towns that have reserves, it just blows me away.
I need my button.
They get in trouble, they have to borrow, or they have to go to the government.